want to make a start of it there because we have to be out of here by 9 o'clock. And for those of you there's plenty of seats here in the front. It's like Mass, everybody's sitting at the back, but there's plenty of seats here at the front anyway. Great to see a good crowd here too. I don't know if you heard us on Clare FM, but we did have a quick note there on Clare FM about this evening's talk. So we're delighted this evening to have Dr. Brian Gurrin, and Dr. Brian Gurrin is from the virtual Treasury, Record Treasury of Ireland. He has written extensively on census taking in Ireland, and he is an expert on that as well as other things. He is also an author. He has published the Irish religious censuses of the 1760s, jointly with Kerby Miller and Liam Kennedy. And he has also joint authored the Death Census of Black 47, eyewitness accounts of Ireland's Great Famine. His work in the Treasury involves identifying surviving Irish census records and introducing these to the public. And we were lucky enough to have Dr. Gurrin come to via Zoom there, I think almost 3 years ago now, to speak to us one night during COVID when he spoke about the virtual record treasury and what they had uncovered at that stage. And of course, it's ongoing, so he has probably new information today and probably information that we can look forward to there in the very near future. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Would we go? Yeah, we're off. Good evening, everybody, and thank you to the Clare Root Society for inviting me along to speak to you this evening. I'm going to talk to you about Irish census records which were located in the Public Record Office of Ireland before the destruction of the archive in 1922. Sadly, as you will know, most of the original census records, along with many other types of records, were destroyed in the archive when it burned to the ground. On a more positive note, however, I'm also going to speak about our ongoing efforts within the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland project to bring the details that were contained in those precious records back into public view via the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland. As Jane said, I've spent many years studying the Irish censuses, and I'm particularly interested in the development of census taking in Ireland, in how the process operated, and in how accurate the various early censuses might have been. My current job sees me as the Census and Population Specialist on the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland project, a Government of Ireland funded project which aims to reconstruct in a virtual sense some of the records which were lost in the Public Record Office explosion and fire on the 30th of June 1922 in the earliest manoeuvres of the Irish Civil War. Our project has 5 core partners: the National Archives of Ireland, the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, the National Archives UK, the Irish Manuscripts Commission, and the Library of Trinity College Dublin. And these institutions have provided us with resources, assistance, advice, support, and expertise, and very importantly, access to their varied collections. Beyond these 5 core partners are many partners supporting institutions too, and we have received wonderful support from libraries, archives, and institutions across Ireland and around the world. Without the very welcome support that we've received, our project could not have proceeded in the fashion that it did to date, and we're most grateful to our partners for their assistance. Now, Ireland's public records, or to be more accurate, more precise, the records that were to become recognised as Ireland's public records, were held in various repositories around Dublin and throughout the country before the 1860s. Some were even in the custody of private individuals with no archival experience or responsibilities, and they could be held in buildings unsuitable for their preservation. As Herbert Wood, author and compiler of what has been called the saddest book in Irish history, the Guide to the Records Deposited in the Public Record Office of Ireland, notes, at the beginning of the 19th century, Dublin Castle and the Four Courts constituted the only public buildings in which records were deposited, the rest being kept in private houses. Subject to the risks of fire and theft, with the exception of the Custom House, in which the records of the Commissioners of the Revenue were kept. Many of these repositories, and we use that word in the broadest sense here, were unsuitable for storing fragile documents, and the sadly neglected records were often found to have been vanished by light-fingered collectors or damaged by damp, by hungry rodents, and most worrisomely, by fire. Over the centuries, vast quantities of priceless, irreplaceable records were incinerated in buildings which were heated by open fires and where their occupants read and worked by candlelight. In the 14th century, the Exchequer was raided by the marauding Burns of Wicklow, and many of its records were destroyed. In 1711, a fire in the old Custom House, then located further west than today's Custom House, at Custom House Quay, or now known as Wellington Quay, 600 metres up the river from O'Connell Bridge, destroyed many of the records of the Council Office and the Surveyor General's Office. You can see an image of the old Custom House here showing us how it looked in 1728. Over the decades and over the centuries, fires singed away and rodents nibbled away at the broad collections of Irish historical documents that are now viewed as Ireland's public records. For a period during the early 19th century, the Irish Record Commission, established in 1810, effected a more professional approach to the subject of Irish record maintenance. A remit to the Record Commission required them to locate a suitable building for some of the vulnerable collections, and the magnificent Wardrobe Tower in Dublin Castle was prepared to serve as a repository for various of the important collections of the records of state, including the Chief Secretary's Office papers, Privy Council papers, and of great personal interest to me in particular, the vast archive of the records of the late Irish Parliament. The Wardrobe Tower was renamed the Record Tower to reflect its new authority as the location for many of the important records of Ireland. And as you can see, it still remains standing to this day within Dublin Castle. The Record Tower and other repositories did not solve the problem, and by the 1860s, it had become clear to the government that a new bespoke record office was required to hold the various important dispersed collections located throughout Dublin City and beyond. Thus, under the Public Record Office of Ireland Act of 1867, a new record office was constructed in the northwest corner of the Four Courts complex on the north bank of the River Liffey, with the office handed over to the Deputy Keeper of the Records of Ireland, Samuel Ferguson, on the 19th of November, 1867. The building highlighted on the map was the Public Record Office. The new record office building opened to the public in February 1868. The Record Office Act outlined the records that were to be transferred to the archive as a matter of immediate priority. Among these high priority records were records of the principal courts in the country, including the Courts of Chancery, Queen's Bench, Common Pleas and Exchequer. All records, maps and documents stored in the Custom House in Dublin. That's the new Custom House. All original wills more than 20 years old. And the records from Birmingham Tower and the Record Tower, which we saw previously, in Dublin Castle, including the records of the defunct Irish Parliament. The records transferred included records which would be of extraordinary value to the social, the political, the religious, the economic, the local, and the family historian and the genealogist today. They included manuscript census returns from the first 5 Irish censuses. These are the censuses of 1813, 1821, 1831, 1841, and 1851. Various census substitute materials, including early taxation rolls and early census type surveys, including all of the returns from the 1766 Religious Census of Ireland, arguably the greatest national survey that was conducted in Ireland between the Down Survey in the 1650s and the commencement of the statutory census series in 1813, We'll discuss the 1766 religious census returns later this evening. And it's often casually presumed that if particular records don't survive for a region, that is because they were lost in the destruction of the Record Office. Hearth tax records dating from the 1660s are particularly useful to the genealogist for locations where they are available for. In the instance of County Clare, however, no hearth tax rolls for the county were ever available in the Record Office. So the destruction of the Record Office is a moot point in terms of Clare's hearth tax records. They never were, there were never any available at all. Other records available or to be transferred included town charters and corporation records, county records including grand jury material, which outlined infrastructural improvements within the counties, county accounts, records from the assizes sittings or the local courts, jail records and hospital records and other material. And interestingly, County Clare was the last county to be brought under the terms of the Public Record Office Act. So county records were not submitted from Clare to the Record Office until 1913. If the county had held out for another 9 years, the county records for Clare would probably have survived in local custody in the courthouse in Ennis and would still be available to researchers today. Testamentary records, including wills and records of probate, and records from many of the parishes of the Church of Ireland, records of baptisms, marriages, and burial records. State papers of various kinds, and early maps, including down survey maps compiled in the 1650s to facilitate land confiscation and redistribution. And the building was destroyed in 1922 and almost all the records were lost. And here's a photograph showing smoke billowing from the Record Office area, the raging fire fed by millions of pages of Irish history burning to ashes. And here's a sad view of the Record Office in flames on the night of its destruction. As you can see, it was quite a catastrophe. And here you can see the catastrophic impact of that destruction. The building that you see here in ruins at the back left was called the Record Treasury, where the archive's records were stored. The contorted ironworks inside the building were the shelving units which had held the records a few days earlier. It may surprise you, given what you see here, to learn that the building was subsequently restored, and though greatly modified, it remains in use today. Here's a nice view of the outside of the fine building in happier times. Although from the outside the Record Office appeared to be a single building, albeit one with two distinct sections, with the southern section slightly lower than the larger main section, in fact, the Public Record Office consisted of two separate buildings. You can see part of the Record Office here. The building on the left, the smaller and the lower of the two, was called the Record House, whilst the building on the right was known as the Record Treasury. It was called the Treasury because this was the building where Ireland's great treasures, its documented histories, were located. You may have noticed that our project is called the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland, and this is in homage to the building on the right. So let's go inside the Record Office and have a look around. Here we are inside the Record House. We can come in here because this is the building that was open to the public for research purposes. So our presence here won't raise any eyebrows. The Record House contained the reading room, which you see here, the strong room, where records were temporarily retained for researchers overnight, for example, and the magnificent indexes to the various collections, like the Custom House collection, the Record Tower collection, the Parliamentary collection, and so on, which facilitated researchers in identifying the location in the Record Treasury of the records which they wished to examine. Behind the desk, we see standing Herbert Wood, author of the book that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Wood was deputy keeper of the Public Record Office in 1922 when it was destroyed. And seated, we see David Alfred Chart, who would become the first deputy keeper of the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland when it was established in Belfast after partition. We see some members of the public seated in the research area. And on the desk, we see what I feel may be a signing in book, where researchers would write their name on arrival every day. We also see a large volume on the desk, which I suspect may be one of the large indexes to one of the collections in the archive. Researcher would have used these indexes to find the reference number for a record that they wish to consult. And we see large double doors on the right-hand wall underneath the magnificent clock hanging on the wall. This had a practical purpose, which we will see shortly. And we do note the curtain rail as well. Inside the record treasury, the second building, the larger and higher in the previous photograph, this is the record treasury. And as we said, it's because it contained the treasures of Ireland, magnificent records which documented more than 700 years of Ireland's past. This is a staged photograph of the inside of the record, of the inside of the treasury building. And this wonderful photograph presenting a busy scene was contained within an album of photographs which was presented to James Mills on his retirement as deputy keeper of the record office. Mills was deputy keeper between 1899 and 1914. And after he died, his wife donated the album to the PROI, to the Public Record Office, and it remains in the National Archives to this day. The photograph presents a rather haphazard scene with large folders precariously balanced on the ledge on floor 2, and the searchers lined up along the rails on floor 3. Searcher was the word that was used for individuals who retrieved or searched for items for the public. The treasury was designed with one long glazed aisle running north to south through the middle of the building, with lettered bays on both sides of the aisle. Bays were identified by letters A to K on the east side and L to U on the west side. So that's 20 bays per floor. The building was 6 stories high, excluding the basement, which had a different arrangement. So the entire treasury contained 120 individual bays. An individual bay was identified by a simple number and letter combination representing the floor number and the bay letter. And when the archive was destroyed, the bays were almost completely full, so the treasury was almost at full capacity. The census records, for example, occupied 4 bays on the top floor at the southern end of the building, bays 6I and 6K and 6M and 6L. In the bays were numbered shelves, and on the shelves were numbered items. So any single record could be pinpointed by simply providing the bay and shelf number of an item, the bay, shelf, and sub-number of an item. For example, Clare's 1821 census returns were located in bay 6I, shelf 2, and were items numbered 48, item number 48 to 61 on the top floor on the south side. And there is a page from the index. The indexes still exist, the indexes to the collections, so we know exactly what was in the collections within the record treasury. And the indexes exist because they were retained in the record house for the public to use, and record house wasn't destroyed. So if you can see that, I don't know whether it's large enough to see, volumes 1 and 2 of Clare's 1821 census returns were subnumbered 48 and 49, and they contained the 1821 census returns for Bunratty Barony. Subnumber 50 contained the census returns for part of Clonderlaw Barony, and volume 51 contained the returns for the remainder of Clonderlaw and the complete barony of Burren, and so on. And here's an extract taken from the 1821 census for Drumcliff Parish, County Clare, where we are this evening. And this extract is available in the Crossley Genealogical Collection in the National Archives of Ireland. The extract gives the names and relevant details of inhabitants living in house number 3 in Jail Street in Ennis town in Islands Barony. Jail Street is now O'Connell Street. And as you can see, the 2 volumes of Islands Returns were located at 6I, Shelf 2, sub number 55, and 6I, Shelf 2, sub number 56 on the right-hand side. The household was lodging in the house of Mary Bowler, a widow. William Beattie, possibly aged 45, was the head of this household, and he lived there with his wife Sophia Beattie, aged 29, possibly aged 29. They had 5 children: William, Theophilus, Sophia, Edmund, and Rebecca, and they were aged between 2 and 11 years. And the household also had 2 servants, Honora and Anna. Each item within the Public Record Office was individually labelled with a label such as this one, giving its shelf location within the Record Treasury. This is the label for the 1821 census volume for Ballybrit Barony, in which was then Kings County, or is now County Offaly, showing the bay, shelf, and subnumber. And we can see this label or examine this label because, by good fortune for the family historians of Southwest Offaly, this census volume survived the destruction of the PRO, and it's located in the National Archives of Ireland today. Unfortunately, the 14 volumes of 1821 census returns for County Clare did not share such a happy fate. All of them were destroyed. Now, unsurprisingly, given the loss of Irish census records in the past, the greatest measures were taken within the Record Office to ensure the safety and security and preservation of the records. Wooden shelving used in the Record Treasury in its initial years, in a manner most favourable to combustion, was gradually replaced by iron shelves to reduce the possibility of damage by fire. In his 11th annual report in 1879, the Deputy Keeper noted that the galvanised iron shelving, which we saw earlier in the image of the destroyed Record Treasury, contorted and bent into shape in the aftermath of the explosions and fire, that iron shelving was thereafter to be used, and he also expressed his hope that hereafter, from time to time, to eliminate the existing wooden shelving from the central and southern sections, as well as the wooden flooring from the galleries of communication, so that there should be nothing inflammable within the building except the records themselves. And these, I may observe, he said, would be extremely difficult of combustion. By 1892, about a quarter of a century after it had opened, no wooden shelving remained in the Record Treasury, and the records were, it was thought, as perfectly preserved from fire as was practically possible. In addition, fire prevention measures had even been built into the architectural design of the office at the outset. Here's the outside view of the building that we saw earlier. The first Deputy Keeper's report noted that, although externally the Record House and Treasury appear to constitute one block of building of uniform design, but the Treasury, which stands considerably higher than the house, is separated from it by an open area 10 feet wide, across which is thrown a covered bridge closed by iron doors at either end, forming the principal means of communication between the 2 edifices. The Treasury, is heated by warm water pipes from furnaces in the basement of the Record House, and may be considered effectually isolated as regards any risk of fire from the official part of the building. There were no open fires in the Record Treasury, so the only threat to that building from fire, it was considered, involved a fire breaking out in the Record House, and if that happened, the 10-foot wide fire break would prevent the fire from spreading from the vulnerable house to the Treasury. And ironically, when the fire break was put to the test, it worked effectively, but it worked in the opposite direction, preventing the fire from spreading from the Treasury to the Record House. So it saved the Record House when the Treasury was destroyed. And if we remember the curtain rail that we spoke about earlier in the reading room of the Record House, this was for holding a curtain to prevent drafts coming through from the outside from the open fire break beyond the door. Now, at its fullest extent, on the 30th of June 1922, the archive was vast, housing enormous quantities of priceless historical records. Despite this, the clever design of the building and the archival system employed meant that it was a simple matter to access items. All that was needed was the bay identification, the shelf number, and the sub-number of the position of the item on the shelf. If you were to visit the record office before it was destroyed, you would fill in an inspection docket to view an item in the fashion that you see here. This inspection docket was filled out on the 26th of February 1918 by the great record agent Tennyson Groves from County Armagh. And on that day, Groves was seeking collector's accounts for County Londonderry, dating from 1690. And as you can see, the collector's accounts item was located at shelf 6E, shelf number 3, sub number 4. Thus, if Groves had submitted this inspection document to the PRO, which he prepared, a searcher would have gone through the double doors from the house to the Treasury, gone up 6 flights of stairs to the top floor of the building, entered Bay E, and gathered a 4th record on shelf number 3. It was that simple to obtain most items in the vast archive. But Groves prepared this inspection document and didn't put it in. So that's why it has been retained. Although most of the records located in the record office on the 30th of June 1922 were destroyed, the news is not universally bad. Immediately an appeal was issued to the public to retrieve any scraps of records that might have been hurled into the air by the explosions and may have landed across the streets of Dublin, and to bring these fortunate survivors to the PRO. Here you can see people picking up records from outside the GPO in O'Connell Street in the centre of Dublin City. Although some records were received from the public through this appeal, the pickings were meagre enough. Following the destruction of the record office, Herbert Wood resigned his position as deputy keeper in 1922 and moved to England, where he kept his eyes peeled for any suitable Irish historical material which might pop up in auction houses in London. If he spotted anything of interest, he alerted the PRO staff back in Dublin. More importantly, some small numbers of records which had been in the record office happened, often by pure good fortune, to survive. The condition of these rare survivors varies. Some are knotted and knurled balls of fused parchment with the individual skins melded together by the intense heat experienced. Others are mere bundles of charred papers, as you see here. Whereas other documents survived largely unscathed, such as this magnificent 1766 religious census return for Rathbarry, County Cork, which remains in near perfect condition after more than 250 years, with just the slightest traces of water damage along the left-hand side of the sheet, providing the only hints to its traumatic experiences. Sometimes it was a case of pure luck that records survived. 23 large volumes of 1851 census returns for County Antrim had been delivered to the PRO's bindery for rebinding just before the archive was occupied by the anti-treaty forces. They remained in the bindery throughout the crisis and were saved from destruction as a result. Other records survived as they were stored in the strong room in Record House instead of being located in the Treasury. This is a page from the 1821 census volume for Arran and Athenry baronies in County Galway. Containing about 500 pages, this volume records the names of more than 9,000 inhabitants of the 2 Galway baronies. Just imagine if similar records survived for County Clare. That's the bad news. But let's flip things and focus not on what was lost, but on what has survived. Perhaps the most important source of surviving information from the documents and manuscripts that were stored in the record treasury in 1922 comes not from the records that were archived there, and they're called the salved or the saved records, but in the transcripts and the notes that had been taken from the records by researchers and record agents between the opening of the PRO in 1868 and its destruction in 1922. Over the course of its 55-year existence, thousands and thousands of extracts and complete copies had been taken from various documents by those engaged in research or for other uses, such as evidence in court cases. After the record office was destroyed, the working notes, transcriptions, extracts, and jottings of these researchers and record agents translated from being the secondary copies that they had been to being the primary records or the only records in existence. Here you can see some neatly typed extracts from the 1821 census for the parish of Newtownards, County Down, near Belfast. As you can see, most of the surnames in this extract are Kennedys, and it's very common in these surviving extracts that only census records for one or two surnames for particular places survive, as the extractor of the information was often focused on a particular surname or a specific family and only extracted the relevant material relating to that surname. Now, this extract is easy to read as it's typed. We're not so lucky with other extracts, many of which were handwritten. A problem with dealing with jottings and working notes is that they were often hurriedly written in the archive and can be difficult to decipher. This extract, for instance, from the 1821 census of Gerty in Townland, County Donegal, is more difficult to read, as the handwriting is somewhat challenging, but also the transcriber, Philip Crossley, used contractions in many instances. Let's look at the first two lines. The first line informs us that house number 27 in Gerty in Townland was a one-story house and was occupied by Patrick Dougherty. Patrick Dougherty was aged 39. He was a shoemaker and a farmer, and he was farming 12 acres. The other person in the house was Patrick's older sister, Susan, aged 43, and Susan was a flax spinner. FS there, right there, that's FS, and that means flax spinner. Here's another transcript from Philip Crossley. This one may be even more challenging to deal with. Let's look at the first household shown. This extract was also taken from the 1821 census. The first line gives us some information on the location of the house in question. House 32 in the townland of Loughgall, in Loughgall parish, was a one-story house. There is one story, Loughgall townland, Loughgall parish, house number 32. The second line tells us that Richard Morrow, aged 50, lived there. Richard was an innkeeper and a farmer, farming 2 acres. The third line gives us his wife's details. His wife was named Anne and she was 40 years of age. Then we see there are 5 children listed. Anne Jane, aged 9, George, aged 8, Ruth, aged 6, John, aged 3, and Richard, under 1. Down here. Also in the household were William Foster, a 16-year-old house servant, and Margaret Spencer, a 20-year-old house servant. The next lines then provide us with details for house 33, the one-story house of George Morrow and his family. So that's quite difficult to read, but let's see what we're doing with those type of records in the virtual treasury later on. After the passage of the Old Age Pension Act of 1908 came into effect in 1909, one of the ways by which age qualifications could be proven was if a person could find themselves in the census records from 1841 or 1851. And thousands of official or certified copies of census records were compiled within the record office for people wishing to prove their qualification for the old age pension. And many of these certified copies have survived. So there's an example, Thomas Abraham, his family. So when we started to investigate what might have survived from the Irish census records, we began to realize that there are actually tens of thousands of census extracts still surviving from all across the country in various locations that had been taken from the census returns prior to the destruction. And we thought it might be useful for researchers of Irish history if these records, scattered amongst genealogical collections, often uncatalogued and barely accessible in various different archives across the country, if they could be brought together in one central place where researchers could freely access them without having to deal with organizing visits to archives, dealing with difficult handwriting, and having to negotiate paywalls and subscription services. And we've made it our job on the Virtual Record Treasury project to attempt to bring together some of these various extracts and transcripts and make them available for public research. So the Virtual Treasury, there's its website. The website is there. You can browse the Treasury to see the repositories that have contributed items to the VRTI. You can examine gold seams, which are collections where we've recovered a significant proportion of the lost current material. There are currently 4 gold seams, and one of the gold seams is the 1766 Religious Census of Ireland. You can access our research strands to find out about our aims for this phase of the project. And you can examine our curated collections area to view some smaller recovery undertakings, which also includes our recoveries of census material. And at the moment, the VRTI contains more than 60 million words of searchable content, and it's growing every day. So first, I'm going to talk about the 1766 Religious Census of Ireland. I've spent a long time examining this. It was launched with a resolution of the House of Lords, which passed on the 5th of March, 1766. And it required the ministers of the Church of Ireland, because the Church of Ireland was the state or official church in Ireland. So the ministers of the Church of Ireland had state or secular responsibilities. And they were to return to this house, to the House of Lords, a list of the several families, a list of the families in their parishes, distinguishing which are Protestants and which are Papists or Catholics. They were also to provide a list of the reputed Popish priests and friars, or the Catholic clergymen in the parish. And all that was to be returned by the first Monday after the Easter recess of Parliament on the 5th, which was the 5th of May, 1766. And this resolution marked the commencement of the 1766 Religious Census of Ireland. It was effectively 9 weeks to count the nation. There's an example of 1766 return, providing a list of names, as you can see. This is for Charleville, County Cork, and distinguishing which are Protestants and which are Catholics. A PR after a name meant a Protestant, nothing after a name in this instance meant a Catholic. Other ministers used different terminology. This is the coverage of the 1766 returns by the conclusion of the survey after the 9 weeks were up, by the 5th of May, 1766. Now on that map, red parishes, the ministers were meant to provide a list of household names. The parishes shown in red are parishes that a list of names was received from. So you can see even for County Clare, there were some. The parishes that are shown in blue are parishes where the ministers did not provide, they didn't meet the requirements, they didn't provide a list of names, they generally provided just numerical breakdowns. So many Protestant households in my parish, so many Catholics. And the white areas show areas that defaulted or didn't make any returns. The coverage is quite remarkable in that it exceeded 83%. That's quite stunning, I think, for the middle of the 18th century. I think the House of Lords, the Lords of Parliament, were surprised at the extent of the coverage. Let's take a sample county, so County Clare. This is what Clare looked like in terms of 1766 returns in 1766. So as you can see, the red areas again showing the parishes that returned a list of names, blue areas showing parishes where lists of names were not provided, just numerical totals, and white areas showing areas that defaulted. So you can see default up around the Burren, down in the kind of Kilrush area, and right along the east of County Clare. So in terms of coverage, of the total area of County Clare, about 17.3% was covered by parishes which returned list of names. Slightly over 50%, 51% of the total area, there was at least some statistical information for, and 31% of the county wasn't covered at all. Now, in terms of survivors, it's very poor for Clare, unfortunately. Most of the 1766 returns have been lost, although there are a few parishes where some extracts survive. So these areas shown in this light fawny color show areas where some names are available. And let's just take a look at what a 1766 return looks like. This is an example. Again, the writing may be somewhat challenging, perhaps, but this says bundle 78. This is the order of the records in the total. Bundle 78, return number 874, covered the parishes of Kilfenachta, Kilmurray, and Clonlea. And some extracts have survived. There are Fitzmaurices, Amesburys, Maddens, Maloney's, McNamara's, Jones, McDaniels. So some names have survived, and some names have survived for a small number of County Clare areas. And as you can see, he indicates that the first two, Fitzmaurice and Amesbury, were Protestants, and the remainder of these were Papists. Now, that might be somewhat challenging to read. So let's first, I want to have a look, and I want to introduce you to the 1766 religious census. We're going to have a little video here which is going to show you how to access it. You access it via the gold seams area. So that little gold seams button. But there's also our curated collections, which I spoke about, our research strands, which tells you about our project, and you can also browse the treasure. But we're going to go into gold seams. There are 4 gold seams available currently. These are where there are quite extensive reconstruction of records. So 4 gold seams available to us. One is Circle. That's medieval. Medieval exchequer returns. The Cromwellian surveys. But the one I'm going to look at is the 1766 religious census. So we click on that. That brings you to the religious census area. That's a magnificent seal. That's an original seal which survives on one of the original returns. That one there, it's really magnificent, wax. But we're going to click Explore. This brings us into the 1766 religious census area. Now, what can you do in here? Well, you have an introduction. You have some introductory text explaining this religious census, so you can read that in your own time. And there's quite a lot here, so you can click read more there and you get fairly extensive introduction to the religious census of Ireland. You can, if you want even more information, just delving deeper, which gives you a very detailed introduction or a very detailed description of the religious census. There's quite a lot in there. There's many thousands of words explaining the religious census, how it operated. We're going to go back to overview. And we are going to we're going to have a quick look at our beautiful manuscripts. Some nice images that we picked out. And these images are picked out to tell the story of the census. So it starts off with the resolution. Then it shows a letter from Bishop of Down and Connor, James, Bishop Down and Connor, to his ministers, telling them to take the census. And then some original surviving returns. That one is for County Armagh. Next one is County Armagh. I think that's County Louth. We go back into overview, and finally, you can browse the gold seam. So this is going to take you down, and this is how you access the census returns to see what survives. And down here, you have a hierarchical view based on the arrangement of the records within the Public Record Office. There are some records from the National Archives, but the Public Record Office is our key one. There are some from Prony and some from the RC representative church body in Churchtown in Dublin. But if we click this open and we go down, remember it was bundle 78, and if we look at bundle 78, and if we go over to the right-hand side, we see this is Killaloe Diocese, which is the diocese which covers most of County Clare. If we click this open and we scroll down and we see Killaloe Diocese, Killaloe and Kilfenora, and we click that open, you're going to see all the 1766 returns that were received from County Clare, even the ones that are lost now, but we provide as much detail about all of the returns that we know about or we have information on. And the one that we were looking at there was Kilfenachta Union, so that was return number 874. So that's how you access it. Let's have a look at Kilfenachta Union. Let's have a quick look at what we've done with Kilfenachta Union. We're going to go back into it again. we're going to click gold seams, and we're going to go straight now to the religious census of Ireland. This is where we're going to access that Kilfenachta Union because it was quite challenging to read. We're going to click explore. The handwriting was quite difficult. We're going to go down and straight, we're going to browse the gold seam. We're going to scroll down to bundle 78, which is where they're stored. I'm going to click that open, Killaloo. Click it open, and we're going to go down to Kilfenora, Killaloo and Kilfenora, and we're going to go straight to the Kilfenachta Union, and we're going to click this open, and we'll see what we have in here. We give a little bit of text about the return, so a little bit of the specifics about this particular census return, telling you who made it, and as much detail as we have about it. We give source material for it, so you can go and look up the original sources. But what we've also done is we've transcribed the entire one, so you don't have to read the text, that handwriting. You have a full transcription of it. And as you can see, there are a lot of names for this. There's about 100 names or so available for that particular parish union, and many common names like McNamara and Daly and so on that are quite common Clare names. So it's all available to you, and it's all searchable, so you don't have to be able to read the handwriting if you find it difficult. It's all transcribed and searchable for you. That's our 1766 religious census return. Oh, and we do provide information there on the priests, which I obtained from William Carrigan's notebooks in County Kilkenny. So we've gone around through various archives to try to find as much information about the returns as possible. So that's 1766, right? Now, what we're working on in this phase is what we're trying to do is recover some details from the 1813 to 1851 census, the 5 statutory censuses that were located in the Public Record Office. So let's see how we access these. We access these slightly differently. We go through the curated collections area. So we go back onto the virtual Treasury website, and we scroll down to our curated collections button, and we click that button. And remember, this is all available for anyone to use. And we click this item over here on the third one, the gleanings from the censuses of Ireland. And this brings us to our statutory censuses area. And you have various things that you do in here. First, again, you get introductory text about the census, explaining how the census operated and how it was conducted and so on, a history of the census. So that's quite detailed, including source material and so on. We also have stories from this curated collection, which is just some interesting stories that we picked out from the census, and we'll be adding to these going forward. So this is about the 1831 census in Woodstock, and another about the 1813 enumeration. But also we have this, you browse the curated collections, and this is how you access the census material. You click browse, and it brings you down, and you get a hierarchy giving you information from all 5 censuses. 1821, 31, 41, 51, and 1813. And you just click these open. So I click open this one, and it's arranged by province. I click open Munster, it's arranged by county. I click open, well, Clare, Cork, and so on. I click open Clare, it's arranged by barony. And I click open the barony, and it's arranged by parish. And I click open the parish, so Drumcliff Parish, or Ibricken Barony, and I click open the parish, and it's arranged by townland. So down there you see Ennis townland, you see Cala, Clonroad, Beg, and so on. And what we're doing is we are building up this hierarchy all the time. As we find information, we put it into it, and it just reconstructs or builds up the hierarchy. So we have found, as you can see, some census information for County Clare. And let us see, yeah. So let's see, we've seen this image before. This is the household of William Beattie in number 3 Jail Street, which we've seen before. Let's see if we can track this down in the virtual Treasury. It's an 1821 census return. It's from Munster Province, County Clare, Islands Barony, Drumcliff Parish, Jail Street. So that's the geographical hierarchy for it. So let's see if we can find this in the record treasury. We go on to the virtual record treasury again. We go down to our curated collections button. We click it. We click into the censuses, our census curated collection, click into it. We click browse. Now it's 1821, it's Munster province, so we click open Munster. Let's click open Munster. It's County Clare, so let's click that open. It's Islands Barony, so let's click this open. It's Drumcliff Parish, so let's click this open. It's Ennis Town, so let's click this open. And if you go down there, it's Jail Street. So let's click this in. Let's select this. So we go into Jail Street. Now this is O'Connell Street. Let's see what we have for Jail Street. If you scroll down, first you have a little bit of text about it, also telling you the sources where we obtained the information from for Jail Street. You can view more if you wish. But if you scroll down here, you see that we have all the information from that entry transcribed. So it's William Beattie's house, all his ages, laid out as it was in the 1821 census return. But if you scroll down, you see we haven't just found number 3, we've found household number 29 as well. We've also found household 30. We've also found household 53, 168, 186, 199, and 203, and 213. And we've transcribed them all and made them available for researchers. All available, all searchable. You don't have to read the text or the handwriting. You don't have to go to the archives. We've made them available. And for instance, those 4 lines are an individual household, a complete household, house number 53 in Jail Street. So if we go back up and look at our Beattie again, our William Beattie household, there it is. And we also provide information such as this here, the enumerator, because he wasn't sure about these. I think the enumerator appears to have been dubious about the ages for William and Sophia. So we also put in a note to say that. So we put in our own little commentary as well. Now, so that's what we're doing. We're identifying material in various repositories, and they're being introduced to the virtual record treasury. They're being introduced all the time. So it's worthwhile keeping an eye on these to see how we're getting on. So let's see how we're getting on with it. Oh, yes, there's our image. So this is what we had. That's our manuscript that we had. And we've converted it into text. And we've also provided, so it's much easier to read, even though that manuscript isn't particularly difficult to read anyway. But we've also provided the source material. So if you want to check it up, you can actually go to the whatever repository it is, such as in this case, the National Archives, and you can access the material itself. So we're providing you with as much information as we can about the sources. So how are we getting on? Right. At the moment, we have introduced about 25,000 names from the censuses into the virtual treasury that were considered lost. Right, these are most of these are new names that people didn't know about in various repositories and collections around the country. And that number is going to expand quite considerably over the coming time. There's our top 10 in terms of the information that's available in the record treasury. So Kilkenny is top of the heap with over 3,000 names from 1821, for instance, followed by Donegal, followed by Waterford, followed by Armagh, followed by Waterford City, Armagh, Waterford County, Tipperary, and so on. You don't see Clare appearing there, which is regrettable, but all's not lost, because that's what's in the virtual treasury at the moment. But we also have identified, and coming soon, and that's all I can say, I'm not going to say how soon, we've identified over 2,500 names for County Clare from 1821, primarily from Corcomroe and Islands Barony. We have them ready to ship them into the VRTI. We just haven't got around to it yet. They'll be coming over the next couple of months. So that's quite a substantial recovery for 1821 for County Clare. There's also going to be Clare 1841 returns and 1851 returns. So there is quite a lot coming for County Clare. So that's the good news for Clare. And what will be available? There are many more tens of thousands of census records that we're going to be introducing into the virtual record treasury over the next year or so. They will be all searchable, so you don't have to go browsing to them, although browsing is a nice way to access them. 2,500 names for Clare coming for 1821. Images of all surviving original census records will be available and will be searchable. Images of some, not all, transcripts, such as what we've seen there for the Beatty household, will be available and searchable. But all transcripts will be searchable, will be available. And searchable images from the published census reports will be introduced into the virtual treasury. And all of these will be freely available to researchers. And we're tracking down as much as we can. Like if you look at that image on the right-hand side, that's an original fragment from an 1821 page. It doesn't contain much information. It contains no information about where it's from. And I spent a fair bit of time examining that and was able to identify that from Ramelton town. That fragment comes from Ramelton town in County Donegal. So we're trying to track down everything and trying to use it as much as we can. And I think it's fitting that we go back to this. It's picking up the pieces. This image always reminds me, or it always says to me, that this is effectively what the Virtual Record Treasury project is trying to do. It's trying to go out and find extracts and little bits and scraps and all this and bring it all back and try to make it available to researchers. And those little households here, one household here and two households there and a couple of names here, when we bring them all together, it does look as if it's building up into a nice sizable collection of census returns. So thank you all for listening to me. I will say, if any of you know about census records for County Clare or for anywhere else, please let me know, because often when I go to talks, people come up to me afterwards and they say, oh, did you know that this exists? And I don't know. Often the information is in the localities. So do follow us on Twitter, Facebook, if you use those. And also I'd say, do keep an eye on the virtual treasury, because we're adding many, many records every day. 200 more records went in for Belfast today, for instance. So if what you're looking for isn't there today, it might be there next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian. That was very, very interesting. Are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions they want to ask Brian? Yes, sir.
Around the time of COVID, the Irish Manuscripts Commission were going to publish a book, I think, dealing a bit on what you've spoken about. Do you know if that has been published? I was trying Kenny's and Galway, I couldn't get it.
You don't know I'm not sure if this is what you're talking about. Yes, in the Irish Manuscripts Commission last year published, devoted a special of their Analecta Hibernica to the Public Record Office, the destruction of the Public Record Office, effectively to our project, and that is out and is available via the Irish Manuscripts Commission.
Thank you.
So, yeah. And it contains many articles. There's even an article on census returns, which we have in it. So,
and that's accessible through Irish Manuscripts.
The Irish Manuscripts Commission.
Website.
The Irish Manuscripts Commission
Okay.
website. Yeah.
That's useful. Anybody else want to ask any questions? I have a question.
Jane.
I'm just curious. What have you found people coming to you, or people that are finding material, let's say in attics or in houses or anything, that are coming to you with material? Because I would assume there's probably a lot of stuff out there,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. A small number, a number of people have contacted us to say that they have, for instance, we spoke about the certified copies for the proving your age for the old age pension. Those went out to people and who wanted to make claims. Other people would contact the PRO if they were interested in genealogy. They'd contact the PRO to say, I want my family's a certified copy of my family's census returns, and the PRO would make that from the census and send it out to them. Those records, there are probably hundreds and hundreds of those records out available. We haven't specifically put out an appeal, but some people have come to us. About a small number of people have come to us and said, yes, we have certified copies. But records are turning up everywhere. There's a chap who's working on the US Civil War records in the National Archives. And once Irish soldiers who fought in the US Civil War, once they hit pensionable age, they had to prove their age credentials in the United States. So they'd write to the Public Record Office and request their certified copy of their census return, which proved their age. That'd be sent from Dublin back out to them in the United States. Then they'd put that application into the US, the Pensions Office for the US Civil War, and they're all filed in the National Archives in the United States. So there's a chap who's working on Civil War records, and incidentally happens to be turning up certified copies of Irish census returns in the United States. That could be down in Australia, and it could be in England and Scotland and so on. So records are turning up in the most extraordinary places. Yeah. We're always delighted to hear about any records at all. So, okay. And once people contact us, the small number of people who have contacted us, once they contact us, and as long as they're happy with it, we introduce those records into the VRTI and make them available for researchers.
Okay, that's great.
It's an excellent question.
That's really good. Yeah, no, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my question is about how to research marriages in a particular parish in the 1930s.
Oh, well, firstly, I guess those records won't be in the VRTI because it's post 1922. So that's a non-starter. But marriage records will be available as civil registration. They'll have been registered. The marriages will be available. So they'll be available in the General Record Office in, I can't remember where it's located. It's located in Dublin, in the Warburg Street. That's the place. Yeah. So that's where you'll go. And secondly, it depends on whether they're Church of Ireland, Catholic, Presbyterian, or so on. The parish will have the parish records will often be available. Well, if they're Church of Ireland, they'll be available in the RCB library, probably. If they're Catholic, records, they'll probably be maintained within the Catholic parish. So you can contact the parish to see if those records are available. And the minister or the priest may make them available to you as well. Yeah. I'd contact the parish in first instance.
With the same day, obviously some people are more interested in this kind of stuff than others. And, you could encounter one parish priest who likes this kind of stuff, and another guy is more into hurling. And he tells you to bugger off, right, or wants to let it be,
Absolutely.
He doesn't have it. Coming back to your word, may, is it totally up to himself?
I think so. I think for Catholic records, I think so. Church of Ireland records would be open, so they would have to be granted. I think Catholic records are they're kind of records of a private church. Actually, I'm incorrect on that. Church of Ireland records before disestablishment are public records. Post disestablishment are private records, but they're generally made available, and they're generally available to the RCB library. But look, the first thing to do is contact the parish and see how you get on. I have done it myself, and I've had no problems contacting the parish. Yeah. But the marriage will have to be registered. It should be registered, so it should be in the GRO in Warburg Street.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Anybody else have any questions?
Since the 61 to 81, how were they destroyed completely?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, so they took in the record office 1813 to 1851, 61 then and 71. The censuses were taken. The reports were published, so the official reports were published, and once they were published, the records were destroyed for 61 and 71. 81 and 91 were retained, right? So they survived, and during World War I, when there was a paper shortage, the 81 and 91 censuses were pulped for. So that's why 1901 survives. So, and remember, I think there's a really interesting thing. Like, we think about 1922 and the destruction of the archive and how catastrophic it was. The 1881 and 91 censuses were published just about 5 years beforehand. So 5 years previous to the destruction of the archive, they were going pulping census records anyway. It's remarkable to think about that. And it's remarkable to think that they took the two oldest censuses and pulped them rather than the two younger censuses, which were 1901 and 1911. So that's why 1901 and 11 have survived. That they just weren't pulped during World War II, but they could have decided to take any of those four, any two of those four if they were looking for that. Or they could have ended up, there was at one stage a thought that they would have pulped the whole lot. So at that stage, we wouldn't be dealing with any census records at all.
Yeah.
Right, I've been doing research in my family for a long time, but I actually just came across a document recently, right? It's a copy of the 1841 census, so.
I don't believe it.
Copy of the 1841 census.
Well,
I have it here in my hand.
That is, I'll be delighted to have a look at that. And that is a certified copy. Can I just show that to people there? That's a certified copy from the Public Record Office.
My family 1909, you can see the date.
Yeah, so that would have been a certified copy that was required. This is fantastic. For something or other, possibly for the old age pension, because the old age pension was 1909. And that is what? So that's absolutely fantastic to see. Look at that.
That's terrific. Yeah, that's great.
It's not often that you
Thanks
get
for
this
sharing
happening at a talk. I'm delighted to see that. And there it is. It's for County Clare, Clonderlaw, Kilmihill, Leitrim Townland. That's fantastic. I'll have a look at that after.
Well done.
Video recording for those
Is that okay?
watching this later.
Are you okay with that?
Are you? Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You can see.
Yeah. Well done. Thank
Super.
I was flabbergasted myself and my nephew.
Yeah.
We're going through all that.
Yeah.
See-
It goes back to 1841, you can see names.
Yes.
Which is,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, we can find out.
And
Well,
it-
we knew the names anyway, I can show you a little bit.
And the youngest person on this is John Brown. So he's probably the person who was applying. He was 14 years of age. So he was probably the person who was applying for the old age pension.
No, I'd say it was Mick Brown.
Oh.
The 1909 was good. I'd say it was Mick Brown. I'd have to show you the map of the family. It's a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's great. Thanks a
superb.
million for sharing
Superb.
that. And it goes to show you what is out there that we may have in our attics or whatever. Other
Exactly.
people, just by talking, just so that's really helpful.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Absolutely. Anybody who has anything like that, we'd be delighted to hear about it.
That's right.
Super.
Because Brian's information is there. You can make contact with us here at Clare Root Society, and we can give you Brian's email address if you come across something of interest. So I think we'll finish for the evening. Anyway, thank you everyone for attending. I hope you enjoyed the talk. We'll hopefully see you the 21st of November for Betty O'Neill, all the way from Australia, who will be talking about her Clare ancestors and some of the ancestral research she did with regard to her Polish father, which is very interesting. She wrote a book about that, and she is in the process of writing a second book. So anyway, we'll see you at 7:30 on the 21st of November, the third Thursday of the month, and safe home, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.